Good evening all. I'd like to, thank quite a few of my family and friends and many others for being here tonight to see how many mistakes I make. I guess for those of you who don't know me, my name is Byron Bailey and I've lived in Richmond since 1955. Tonight I'd like to give you a little family background and talk about my long connections with Richmond and some of my own memories of the township and growing up here. In 1821, my great-great-grandfather, Robert Bailey, landed here under an assisted passage. He served his sentence at Sorrel and received 25 lashes for neglect of duty in 1824. He received his pardon in 1827, and on his day of release, he was fined 5 shillings for being drunk and disorderly. I know where I get it from. He met, after moving from Sorrel, he moved to Richmond Campania area, and after his first marriage failed, he met my great-great-grandmother, Jane Houston, who also arrived courtesy of an assisted passage. They married and had 12 children, 2 of whom died in infancy. My great-great-grandparents, grandparents, great-great-grandparents, grandparents, parents, and a brother are all in St Luke's Cemetery. My father, Jack Bailey, grew up in Jacombe Street, Richmond. At the age of 13, he left school and joined his father working for the HEC as a woodcutter during the Great Depression. He was away from Richmond for nearly 20 years, and when he returned, he had a wife, Marjorie, and a growing family. I was 9 at the time. I commenced my schooling at Richmond Primary School, along with about 20 students from grade 1 to 4. Our teacher was Mrs. Smith, who had the unenviable job of trying to educate a diverse bunch of kids across 4 grades. Schooling at Richmond was a real culture shock for me, having previously been a pupil at the much bigger Butler's Gorge and Bronte Park schools. After grade 4 at Richmond, I attended Campania Area School, which was being expanded at the time and catered for pupils up until year 9. Both Richmond Primary and Campania schools still serve our community. I remember some very energetic and committed ladies serving us an excellent hot lunch in the school canteen at Campania. The canteen was in a couple of old musset huts located in the school grounds. I remember getting onto a school bus one evening to attend the school break-up, which was being held at the Campania Hall. There were many kids and several adults on the bus heading up, and after the bus had just passed the Richmond football ground, the steering failed. The bus rolled onto its side, left the road, rolled onto its side, and went out into Jones's paddock. You can imagine a heap of kids, the bus driver and the adults trying to pick ourselves up from among broken seats and other debris to get out of a bus. Of course, this was long before the day of escape hatches, so we were either pulled up or climbed out the driver's side door onto the engine cowl from where we had to slide down the mudguard, or out of a very small window, rear window, which from memory one of the students had broken. There was no safety glass, and one of the 2 of us received small cuts and grazes for our efforts. Nonetheless, we all got out of a bus and found our way home. I remember cleaning up a bit and explaining to Mum and Dad what had happened, and a knock came at the front door. On answering the door, it was one of the teachers from school who was making sure I'd arrived home, and when he found I was okay, asked if I was prepared to go to the concert and play play my part in the school play. As I'd already cleaned most of the dirt and debris off my pursing, I combed my hair and proceeded to Campania. After performing in the play and collecting my school certificate, I was brought home. Oh dear, I might put these on. Swimming down the dam was very popular in those days. The river was much cleaner and there was a diving board adjacent to Jimmy Retrineman's pump. Perhaps not politically correct to say that, but there were male and female change rooms on the bank where the Tas Water Structures and HEC building is today. Fishing was also a popular pastime. The water above the dam had eels, perch and tench. Below the dam wall you could catch rock roaches, jolly tails and eels. If you ventured to Black Tom's Hole, not politically correct these days, but you might be rewarded with bream, silver trevally or mullet. On a good day, you would sight a gummy shark feeding its way up to the dam. Platypus and water rats were also common in the river, and the occasional sea lion all come up the river to the flat rocks and even up to the dam, and on at least one occasion up above the dam. Jimmy and Kee Chung developed their market garden from around 1954. It was interesting to watch Jimmy on his old grey Fergie tractor with a single furrow plough making a channel in the river to extract the last of the accessible water down to the dam so that it could be pumped onto his garden. My brother and I both worked in the market garden at weekends, and my sister also picked strawberries there at one stage. My brother went on to work there full-time for a period after he finished school. To load the util truck with carefully washed carrots and parsnips, as well as cauliflowers and cabbages, etc., was a work of art, with everything having to be stacked facing outwards and slanted to the middle of a tray. Jimmy and Kee were hard-working people who operated a pristine market garden. They employed several locals, and in later years, Kee's wife Margaret could also be seen working away very hard. Often in our young days, after a hard day's work in the garden, Jimmy would ask us to go up to the old house, which is that building down the bottom of a bank, where he would present us with a bag of hot roasted peanuts to take home to Mum. As you can imagine, the township of Richmond has changed somewhat since the mid-1950s. In the 1950s, Richmond was a very different town, both in size and character. There were only 19 or 20 homes on the eastern side of a river, and the land was unoccupied from behind Punch Burridge's, Zeg's today, to the home on the corner of Edward and Torrance Street near the church. It was very much a country town, and in fact, if you owned a cow, you could go to the council and purchase a tag and put it on your cow, and from that moment forward, your cow was permitted to wander the streets at will. If you didn't shut your gate and your garden was eaten, you're bad luck. The only strip of bitumen extended from near Oak Lodge to the bridge. All other streets were gravel. In the mid-1950s and 60s, the road from Cambridge to Richmond and then on from Richmond to Campania was sealed. Walking up the main street from Jack Smith's Bakery, where am I? Yeah, we had Jack Smith's Bakery, first on the right. When he wasn't baking bread or delivering it along with milk to the township and surrounding districts, he could be heard playing the piano brilliantly. It didn't make Mum so happy when we'd been sent to buy a double loaf of warm bread, and arriving at home and handing it to her, she found the middle had been eaten out of it by us kids. The current service station was taken over by Mr. and Mrs. Rouse in the early 50s, and later their son-in-law and daughter, Lou and Sonia Holobrodek, ran the business for many, many years. The current doctor's surgery was a grocery shop operated by Bernie Ryan, and the Bridge Hotel, of course, was on this side. Opposite was the bookmaker's shop, and together with a pair of conjoined red brick cottages, they fell into a state of disrepair and were eventually demolished. No doubt they would have been very valuable properties today if they had been restored. But this was before restoration, and indeed Richmond became fashionable. Wandering further down Bridge Street, Gillows had what is now the IGA, and opposite, and next door to the commercial hotel, another grocery store and servo run by Mr. and Mrs. Shepherd, was a butcher's shop. Sorry, I missed my place here. Yeah, the hotel was another grocery store run by Mr. and Mrs. Shepherd. Going down to the corner, Mr. Crocker ran the post office, and opposite this establishment was another grocery store ran at that time by Mrs. Chapman. Taking a left-hand turn towards Commercial Road and Richmond State School was a butcher, shop and hairdresser, short back and sides no doubt. Another butcher shop at that stage could be found in the corner of Charles and Gunning Street down near the bridge. And who could forget Mark Blackburn's butcher shop? I could spend quite some time sharing my memories of that. If you walk past the school towards Land's End, you would come across two train lines at the very end. These train lines ran out into the bay some distance, and they were used to permit dollies to go out into the very shallow water to unload the boats and barges that brought the supplies into Richmond. I think, as far as I know, those lines are still there. I must go and have a look. Country towns all have their local characters, and Richmond was no exception. One that comes to mind lived over a bridge and was partial to 1 or 10 lemonades. It wasn't uncommon for his wife to bring their wheelbarrow to the Bridge Hotel when the number was closer to or above 10, load her husband into the barrow and wheel him home. Another local resident unfortunately suffered from some post-war issues. He would wander off on a Sunday afternoon walk up Campania Road, turning left into Tea Tree Road, along to the Tea Tree Church, turned left back through Middle Tea Tree, back to Richmond. How he didn't get run over, I will never know. On another occasion, one very frosty morning, this gentleman was found by my grandfather in Edward Street under one of the many pine trees that lined the street from St Luke's to the football ground. He did a quick check and went and got the doctor. No signs of life were detected. So my grandfather went to a local policeman. The trio were watching the body, working out what to do, when it sprung to life, mumbled a few words and walked away from them with his usual giant strides. He got up and went. Another chap, this is a more recent and probably one of the last characters, I guess, of Richmond in many ways, but this chap was also inclined to enjoy a quiet little drink or two, and was visiting a local doctor who advised him he needed a dietary change. He advised the chap to consume more greens. A few weeks passed before the next visit when the doctor asked if he was consuming more greens. The chap replied yes. When asked by the doctor how many and how often, he replied, about a dozen a day. When questioned further, a dozen what? A dozen green ales. The doctor was not happy with this response. On the chap's next visit to the doctor asked him why he was there. The chap replied by informing him that the vet was closed. Despite this, the two had a good patient-doctor relationship. I should stress that. A few lemonades, fortified, were also enjoyed by one of the district's carriers, who at times required a driver to get him and his truck home. On one night, I went into the Bridge Hotel and found him in need of a lift home. I loaded him into his truck, fully loaded with 44-gallon drums, and took him home. I pulled up and jumped out of a truck to his wife, who turned the garden hose on me. In anger, she either mistook me for him or thought I had been drinking with him. I learnt later that the empty 44s had left home much earlier in the day, proceeded to the Bridge Hotel car park, or to the Bridge Hotel, and spent the day in the paddock behind the Bookmakers Club. Some of this does complement or what Diane has previously said. There are numerous sporting and social activities in the town. Dances were held on a regular basis and buses brought people from Hobart to mingle with the locals, many of whom divided their time between the hall and the pub until such time as they went home happy. Pictures were held in the hall on a weekly or fortnightly basis until TV ruled them unviable. The pictures were conducted by Mr and Mrs Perry, who lived down Woodbridge Way. They owned a tarp-covered truck, which not only used to carry their equipment, but also provided them with their accommodation. The Perrys took the pictures to many towns, including Campania, Colebrook, Pontville, quite a wide area. The hall has been a venue for the successful Richmond Badminton Club, which sadly has fallen by the wayside. The tennis club has had 3 different homes. The first was behind the hall, which had the council works depot behind it, and a big row of 3 or several big pine trees. The entrance went to the police station, and the tennis court was exactly behind that. The next move for the club was to the site of the Margaret Mitchell Garden, before inhabiting its current location near the football grounds. The local golf club has also had several homes over my lifetime. When I was younger, the club was located at Richmond Park before transferring a few kilometres down the road towards Cambridge. This course sat on the side of Butcher's Hill and had a reputation for being very challenging. In more recent years, the course has moved to Cambridge and has undergone significant development over the time. In my time, Richmond has always had cricket and football teams. They commenced around the 1870s, and they've both experienced highs and lows of competitive sport over the years. Other than the social hit, I never played cricket, but the club has had many successes over the years, and after a successful marriage to Cambridge, has continued to thrive. What have I done here? I have been involved with the Richmond Football Club in almost every capacity since 1966. I've been as a player, committee member, occasional goal umpire, runner and president. Both my wife Diane, myself and our son are life members of the club. There has been many times over the years when the club has had some terrible hidings, but we've always bounced back. I'm aware that we've won at least 21 premierships, 9 reserve premierships, and we also had a successful junior team playing under the Coal River Valley jumper. As well, a junior team under a Richmond jumper operated in more recent years. In my earlier days, the team travelled long distances to play, Maydena, Ouse, Hamilton, Swansea, etc. And some supporters travelled by bus. It was a nightmare for the driver who would park in front of a Bridge Hotel and go in to round up the players and supporters who were partaking of a pre-travel, pre-game drink. Having loaded his passengers onto the bus, his next stop was just up to the commercial hotel. The biggest problem being that when the driver disembarked and entered the commercial through one of the doors, the players and supporters would hop off the bus and go into the establishment through another door and continue imbibing. The driver must have been persistent. However, he always got us to the games on time. Our regular driver was affectionately known as Pop. He was also the boot studder and helped with trainer duties on the day. The trip back from the game was also an interesting journey, with both ladies' and men's toilet stops being taken as required. I remember on one occasion, after playing at Gretna and making the mandatory stop at the Gretna Green Hotel, Pop rounded everyone up, got them on the bus to head home. The bus went down the hill, up the other side to the Rose Garland Hotel, where it was compulsory to have a drink and toilet break. How Pop put up with one, I'll never know. In my early football days, the standard of ground maintenance was pretty basic. I can remember borrowing Merv Ben's tractor and slasher on more than one occasion on a Saturday morning prior to the game and chewing the grass off to a half-suitable surface. Every sporting team has had some very committed supporters, and Richmond Football Club was no different. One mother and daughter combination who could be found sitting on the wooden seats on this side of the Richmond Oval at the Campania Road end had a particular ability to assist umpires with their decision making and help them develop their language skills. Opposition players also got their fair share of encouragement, and if they got too close, a sharp swing with the umbrella was not out of the question. Another character that is fondly remembered around the club assisted with a trainer role and liked a medicinal drink on an ongoing basis. He was a great bloke and clubman, but if you had consumed a few drinks and you happened to go down on the ground, you'd be much better off getting up and going before he could get to you. He often had to be assisted by other players to point him in the right direction to where the injured player was laying. I remember on one occasion when he was running out to treat a player, his first aid case came flying open. Along with the bandages and ointment were several cans of beer. If it wasn't for players, supporters and characters like this though, many people working behind the scenes, the clubs may not have been here today. Up to the 1960s, Richmond also held at the Oval an annual agricultural show, which in its day was both well organised and well patronised. There was a good number of sideshows and home displays on offer. Gangers from Campania were using small planes to spread super and would fly a plane down and land it in the paddock where the water point is up there now. As you can imagine, the planes attracted a lot of attention in those days from young and old. The show was also fortunate to be able to display Mr Nook Kelly's Illawarra shorthorn cattle, which were recognised as one of, if not the best herds in the country. Myself and other kids had the privilege of leading some fine cattle, Nugent Princess and its many relations, in the Grand Parade. The Nugent property was also the home, just up the road, was the home to the local annual horse race meeting. But sadly, like many other country events, it ceased to operate in the 1960s, maybe early 1970. And the venue was then used for stock car racing, with Richmond area producing a few very good drivers, and many out-of-town drivers also competed at the meets. They were very successful for a period of time. But looking back now at the speed of those vehicles charging around the track with nothing but hay bales between them and us, it made you wonder about OH&S today. True. The circus usually set up at Campania, but once or twice it also came and set up at the Richmond Oval. I remember sneaking under a big top one day with a few kids, and having the time of our lives on the big trampoline, only to be rudely interrupted by a big burly circus operator who threatened to make certain parts of our person very sore if he caught us. I don't know if you've ever tried getting off a big trampoline when you're in full flight, but I can tell you it isn't easy. Nonetheless, we made our escape unscathed and at a pace that could have challenged Usain Bolt. The football oval had a very different appearance in those days, with stockyards to hold the bulls for the bull riding, situated next to where the club rooms now stand. There's also a long row of stock sheds on the northeastern corner of the ground, with the ever-compulsory boozer under the pine trees at the river end. A large show pavilion building was situated on the northern side of the ground towards Campania Road end. This building was converted by a hard-working group to become the club rooms and change rooms for the footy team after the show's demise. Many a memorable function were held in there, including Sunday school, a popular place to attend prior to Sunday trading and a major fundraiser for the club. Looking back, I'm sure the local policemen turned a blind eye to Sunday school operations, providing the trading hours were not too long and common sense prevailed. I do remember on one occasion in 1976, when I was president of a football club, I looked out and noticed a policeman was driving into our direction to the club rooms, and as president I went out to greet him. He advised me that it was late. There were a lot of cars there and that he had to go to Campania. He made it very clear to me that we would not be back to club rooms when he got back from that short trip. I can assure you it was the quickest closing in the bar and evacuation of the club rooms in history. In 1981, these club rooms burnt to the ground, and the excellent club room we have now was opened in 1983. April 1960 brought with it floods to the highest level I have ever seen in my lifetime here, and the oldies told me that they were close to or equal to the Great Flood of 1931. Many fences were destroyed, farm buildings flooded and damaged. At one stage there was a real fear that the large logs coming down the river could cause major damage to the bridge. The lower part of Jimmy and Key's 10-acre paddock has considerable flood damage, losing crops, including rhubarb. It was lucky they had the foresight to remove their water pump, as the pump house was well underwater. I shudder to think how the township would fare if this floods of this magnitude hit the area again. We went from floods to fires. In 1967, bushfires, which coincidentally occurred on my mother's 40th birthday. And no, it wasn't caused by her candles. I was working in Hobart at that time, and all my attempts to get home up until about 6 p.m. that night had failed. The fires had travelled down much of the eastern side of the village, but to the best of my memory, only 2 houses had been destroyed, one in St John's Circle and the other on the corner of Parrymore and Jacombe Streets. The owner of the second home was the local carrier at the time, and he had a bulk fuel depot on the site. Miraculously, the fire went straight to the fuel depot and did not catch alight to any of the 44-gallon drums or anything else. It went under, burnt the house down and kept going. It was put down to the saving grace might have been that the empty drums had been taken away that particular day for refilling, and all the drums on site were full and sealed. Anyway, nothing happened there. Not too long prior to the fires, the then Richmond Council had purchased and overhauled an old Ford Blitz fire truck. That night many of us worked tirelessly, burning off Jones's paddocks to the north of the village, as there was a belief that the fire could reignite, travel down the western side of the river and into the town proper. Fortunately, this didn't happen, and the town, and indeed southern Tasmania, went about rebuilding. The Fire Brigade grew from these humble beginnings of the Ford Blitz to a snub-nosed Bedford which you could nearly run alongside of, to an international truck, and now to a modern fleet of vehicles and equipment. The fire sheds have also come a long way, from the wooden sheds on the site of a Nickleby units to a new site on the same site, and then to the very, very good sheds near the Oval. The old fire sheds had an old lounge and a couple of donated chairs that were donated from somebody. Opposite was another shed known fondly as the casino. This very basic establishment became renowned for its hospitality over many years. A call-out for fire resulted in a couple of QLDs, quite little drinks, and a top-level debriefing after the event. Similarly, many vacant blocks were burnt off around the town, with the reward being a slab of beer, often consumed during the mandatory top-level debriefing that followed. In the early 1970s, the commercial hotel was enlarged and upgraded. This subsequently led to the demise of the Bridge Hotel, and Richmond was left with only one licensed watering hole, the now Richmond Arms. The Arms caught fire late on an evening in 1978, to the best of my abilities, and you can be reassured there was a great commitment from all us volunteer fireys to put it out ASAP. I had just climbed into bed when I heard the siren. I jumped up and looked out the window, and you could see the smoke billowing from the pub. I quickly dressed and proceeded to the corner of Franklin and Bridge Street. I could hear the fire truck coming down the road, and as it slowed down, I jumped on the back. When the truck pulled up at the pub, it was a very surprised driver who hopped out and found the very temperamental fire pump already running. After the fire was extinguished, a very important debriefing session took place at the bar. As it was appropriate to do that, and I can assure you it was a very long debrief and a very late night. Wasn't good at work the next day. Reflecting over the years, Richmond has changed considerably. Bitumen roads, town water, and later sewerage and some tourist-orientated people moved into the township and helped develop Richmond into the town we live in today. I have enjoyed growing up here and being part of a community. I teamed up with my wife in 1964 and commenced purchasing our block of land a couple of years later. We built our home in 1969, got married, moved in, and have been blessed with 2 daughters and a son, their partners, and 6 grandchildren. If everything works out on Plan A, we will stay in our married lifetime home for many more years before being transferred over the river. I trust you have enjoyed my stories tonight, and there has been something of interest to you all. Thank you for listening.